So this afternoon, I'd just like to cover the service supply chains project, some of the temperature loggers that we've been using, summary, show you a dashboard that Queensland DAF have developed in consultation with some exporters and growers. There'll be some more information at the end and also a chance to ask some questions and comments. The service supply chains is a joint project with Queensland Department of Ag and Fisheries. It's been running now for 3 to 4 years. There's 3 main components in the project. One of them is temperature monitoring, and that's what I'll talk about today. The second one is decision aid tools, or DATs, and that's what John Lopresti has been working on. We presented some information on that last week and we'll present some more next week. And the third component is sustainable solutions, which is the technology transfer or extension side of the project. So the goal of the service supply chains project is to increase the value and profitability of Australian horticulture. We're looking at exports to Asia. And how are we going to do that? We'll be looking at improving the freshness, the taste and the consistency. And one way we'll be doing that is through demonstrating the benefits of temperature monitoring to growers and exporters and trying to encourage industry to adapt this technology. Now, traditionally, I guess growers and exporters have used USB data loggers, and that's to protocol markets, but sometimes the information, the temperature data doesn't always come back to the growers or the exporters, and it's only generally through insurance claims that the growers or the exporters will be getting information, and that's where real-time data loggers come into it. The loggers on the left here are SIM card-based loggers. This is only a small selection of what's available out there in the marketplace, but these are the ones that we've been trialling in this service supply chains project. And you can see there's the Emerson, Frigga, there's a Temptail and a Tive logger. The one in the middle is an X-Sense logger, and it works a bit like a tollway. It works by radio frequency, so when the logger passes within 100 metres of this control unit, it'll download the data. The logger on the right is a Bluetooth logger, and it's similar to, I guess, a USB logger, except the importer doesn't need to retrieve that. If they're within 30 metres of the logger, they can connect to it through Bluetooth on their phone. All of these loggers are suitable for road, sea and air transport. However, there are some exceptions with the air freight, just due to the technology and flight mode capability. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail later. Some of the technical specifications of the loggers here. I'm not going to be recommending any loggers, but it's just here for comparing and contrasting, I guess. Generally, they're around 80 to 100 mil in size, and they weigh roughly 100 to just over 150 grams. They all have temperature, location and light sensors. And the light sensor is particularly useful for if shipping containers are opened, well then you can see an increase in the light levels on the logger, or if the logger's within the carton, when the carton's opened, you can identify that. Some of the loggers have relative humidity, vibration, shock and motion sensors. And as far as I know, the only one that has a probe is the Frigga logger. The 1 metre cable would be useful for measuring core temperature of fruit, say within the same box as the logger itself, or there is a 15-metre cable that you could put down the other end of the shipping container so you can get 2 different temperatures. There are alerts via email and SMS. They have additional charges. Some of the other specifications is the battery life, generally 60 days. The tide logger is a bit longer. They all have access to cloud facilities, and the temperature ranges of these loggers vary from about -30 up to about 70 degrees, which is more than adequate. The accuracy is pretty good, within half to 1 degree. And the interval time and the reporting interval is, I guess, important because that depends on, it'll burn through the battery a lot faster. So depending on the length of the trip, you can extend these intervals just so that the battery lasts a lot longer. Reporting wise, they have Excel, PDF, Word and CSV, which is a data file which you can download at any time. And most of them are recyclable, or they have a green option these days. How do these real-time loggers work? They have a SIM card in them, much like a mobile phone. So they connect to the mobile phone network where they upload data automatically. It then transmits into the cloud, and then the user can see the data on a PC or handheld device pretty much at any time, as long as there's connectivity. How to start these loggers? Pretty simple, pretty quick. The Emerson one, you just have to pull a tab, and the other loggers push a start button, one of these green buttons here, hold it in for a few seconds until lights flash and there's a few beeping sounds. My advice is to start these loggers early, at least 1 to 2 hours before deploying, because they need to connect to the network. And like at home or at work, there's always some areas where reception can be low. So it's good to take the loggers to either an open area or an area where there's good reception, just so that they connect prior to deploying them. Because if you don't, well then data or information may not be available until the loggers reach importers overseas. So that could be 3 or 4 weeks later. After activating the loggers, it's just a matter of going to their homepage, logging in, entering a serial number or an additional code with the Frigga logger, and then activating the loggers. That's the quick bit. The slower bit is creating shipments and setting up alerts. And as you can see on the right-hand side, the more information you put in, I guess the more you'll get out. But it's also important if you have a lot of loggers, it would be easier to track or manage the information within, say, a few weeks of the export process, or even if you're analysing data at the end of the season. The alerts you can set up so that you get email or SMS, and that's, you can set up thresholds, temperature thresholds, so that if the logger temperature goes above a set level, well then you can get an email or an SMS. And similar for location alerts as well. You can set locations along the supply chain so that when the logger passes into this location, it can send you a message, which I guess is good for alerting customers or freight forwarders that there's produce on the way. where to place the loggers. The logger companies recommend placing them in or on the top of the last pallet closest to doors, whether that's on a truck or in a shipping container. They don't generally recommend inside the carton because that interferes with the signal sometimes, and not on the wall or the floor. If the loggers are placed outside the container where the produce is, well, then it's not, I guess, giving the most accurate environmental temperature of what the produce is in. Air freight. Emerson loggers are approved for over 20 airlines. They're in discussions with a few more. The Tive logger is approved for 4 airlines there, and Escavox, which is, I guess, the new kid on the block, has approval for 2 local airlines, Air New Zealand and Virgin Australia. Because these loggers contain SIM cards, like a mobile phone, they need to be able to go into flight mode automatically when they're at the airport or upon loading. So Emerson have 2 ways that loggers can transmit into flight mode function, and that is through geofencing around the airport. So when the logger passes through this geofence, well, it'll automatically transfer to flight mode. And the second option is they do contain an accelerometer in the logger, and when they detect rapid changes in speed and height, they automatically transfer into flight mode. With the Frigga logger, it's a little bit more manual, where you need to type in the airport and then tick a box here, which then sets up flight mode within a 5-kilometre radius of the airport. And you need to set how long you would like the logger to be in flight mode. So just in summary, there's many positives of using real-time loggers. The first one is that, I guess, the entire supply chain is more visible, so that you can see where temperature fluctuations might be occurring, and then you can enact on them to try and streamline it and reduce those temperature fluctuations. It is in real time, which means if there is any issues, then you can do something about it rather than waiting for produce to arrive at the end of the supply chain or at the importers, for example. The alert settings are a good function, and as I've mentioned, you can set up temperature alerts and also location alerts. And with these loggers, you've got full access to the data right from the time you start them, and you can download reports pretty much anytime, 24/7. And as I've mentioned, they're useful for road, sea and air transport with some restrictions. Some of the cons, or the not so good points, is signal may be compromised. These real-time loggers, when they're in the middle of the ocean, there's obviously no mobile phone towers, so they can't download information there, but they will hold that information until they come into contact with a mobile phone tower at the other end, and then all the data will be downloaded. And obviously air freight, not all airlines have approval to use them as yet. There are higher unit costs for these loggers. The real-time loggers are approximately $80+, which is obviously a lot more expensive than, say, a USB logger, which has been used in the past. And they also have minimum order as well. So, for example, 10 may be a minimal order in some of the, for some of the loggers. One other negative potentially is that with the start buttons, they may accidentally be pushed. So that's just something to be aware of when using these loggers. And also the time to program them. I did set one up a few weeks ago, not having done it for a while, and it took me roughly 15 minutes. But that was because I was setting up these alerts. So I needed actual addresses for when the loggers passed into, say, the ports around Australia or overseas. The dashboards, the data on some of them are limited to a few months. So that's just something to be aware of. Other logger companies have the data available for much longer periods. It's just something to be aware of. And also the battery shelf life is generally sort of limited to several months. So when ordering the loggers, it's best just to order the ones you're going to use and not keep them on the shelf, I guess, for 12 months or for next season. Just an example of some photos that from a sea freight consignment that went to China earlier this year, and the loggers positioned in there. There's one here measuring core temperature, and interestingly, the core temperature didn't vary much. There wasn't much difference between the core and the ambient temperature in that box, which was good. To the dashboard now. This is a dashboard developed by Queensland DAF in consultation with growers and some exporters. It's used for research purposes only, so it's not trying to compete against the other dashboards from these bigger companies. But you can see here just some basic setup here. The loggers, the shipment numbers. We have the API for a couple of loggers, Frigga and Tithe at the moment, and that's so that we can live stream the data from the logger into this dashboard. We can also set logger positions on here, the origin and destination, when they were last recorded, and the most recent location. And the green line, or the green ticks here, means that they're all within the threshold limits that have been set up before. And if we go and look at one of these consignments, this is some of the information that we've put in at the start. It's of a fresh fruit consignment from northern Victoria to Indonesia to Surabaya. We set up some location alerts around these places here so that when the logger passed within that range, we got an alert notifying that it was there. You can see the map of the route there, and I'll show you a larger version of that in a minute. And yeah, the threshold temperatures there we've set at -1 to 4. So if we go and look at the map in a little bit more detail, these red pins here are downloads from mobile phone towers. So it'll draw a straight line between these points. Obviously the ship's gone around the bottom of WA there. But you can see it going to Indonesia. It's gone up here, through here, and it's actually gone to Malaysia first, come back to Singapore, and then come back down to Surabaya in Indonesia. And on this trip here, I think it was roughly 4 weeks. And there's a little bit more detail. These are the pings along the coast here. This is a temperature graph from the actual logger. If you hover the mouse over the temperature graph, it'll show you the date and the time and the temperature. Just a little bit more information on the project. There was an industry article published last year in the Vine magazine in July that explains a little bit more about the project and some useful features of some of the loggers that we've used. Conducted an outturn assessment there in, I think it was China. And another industry article that is in the process of being published at the moment in Across Borders. It's coming out next week, I believe. Just has some more information about these loggers, and there's that map that I was just explaining here. Interestingly, there's a section here that is from an exporter. If we receive an alert and see the temperature increasing, then we can contact the transport or shipping company and ask them to check it out. And interestingly, just recently, I received an alert from one of the loggers. I contacted the exporter, who then contacted the shipping company and was able to check out the temperature because it was increasing. And within a few hours or so, it sorted out the issue, and we could see the temperature decreasing, which was good. So I think that's definitely one of the advantages of using these real-time loggers. And that's also a practical example. All right, I think that's pretty much it from me, Mark. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. If there's any questions or comments, I'm happy to take them. There's obviously some more information available here that Mark has mentioned about previously. So I'll hand it back to you, Mark.
Fantastic, thanks, Glenn. I have a question just to start off, because I'm just wondering if there's any questions that might come through. You've got one more year of the project, so you're working with Summerfruit, sorry, and table grapes. Is there an opportunity for people to get involved with your project for this last 12 months?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we're happy to talk to any of the industry, especially about temperature monitoring and potentially helping to work with them to monitor some export shipments in the future.
Okay. Let's see if any other questions have come up. I've got a few more. I mean, you're talking about real-time data. Has it been used domestically at all? Are you aware of anything that way?
Yeah, I do believe they are using it domestically, maybe in other industries like meat and seafood, but other than that, not 100% sure, but it's definitely got the capability for using locally, domestically, and even to say New Zealand or something.
Okay. Just on the Summerfruit shipping, just to touch base on that again, because we talked about this some time ago. What sort of things did you see around shipping? What did real time provide from a shipping perspective?
Yeah, I guess the main thing that we've saw from the shipping monitoring that we've done is the actual time that it's taking for the sea freight containers to arrive in the importers overseas, and it's taking roughly 4 weeks, which is a bit longer than a lot of what growers and exporters originally thought.
Noel Ainsworth, one of the says, I'm aware that a number of avocado domestic and export businesses are now monitoring temperature more closely. Thanks, Noel. That's fabulous. So from Andrew McNeish, nice presentation, Glenn. Are reusable loggers available and more cost effective, or are they just a single trip?
Thanks for the question, Andrew. Yes, the loggers that I presented today are single-use loggers, I guess because the battery life is 60 to 90 days. But there are other loggers within those brands that are reusable. But I guess the only thing to think about there is they will work better in a closed loop export supply chain. So Depending on the relationship between you and the importer, well then it would be easier to get those reusable loggers back.
Great. Another question from Noel. Glenn, do you think temperature monitoring is more important when using air or sea freight?
Well, we've seen from the monitoring over the last few years that the sea freight is generally very good temperatures, very low, 0 to 2 degrees for the whole trip. There's only a few maybe small increases in temperature around transshipping and unloading, but air freight is obviously a shorter time frame, but that's where we're seeing larger spikes in temperature. And it can be up to 10 or 12 degrees, but yeah, just for a short period of time.